Hearing God's voice in your pain. Job 2, verse 7. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores, from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. 8. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. 38, verse 1. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. 42, verse 12. The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. The pain. Job is the character reference for patience in the mind of most who are familiar with his story. We may have heard the proverbial statement, "We need to have the patience of Job," from a family member or a friend. Indeed, one cannot miss this pointed demonstration of Job if the book is read. Job's virtuous patience is evident. When we read his story, we are also brought to recognize his pain. He is the epitome of pain and suffering. His suffering is only surpassed by the crucifixion of our Lord. His suffering is only surpassed by the crucifixion of our Lord. And at one point or another, we have all been through suffering. And if you haven't yet, keep living. And if you haven't yet, keep living. And if you haven't yet, keep living. Job was an upright man who lived for God's pleasure. His righteousness caught the attention of the accuser of the brethren. Permit me a couple of sentences just to point out that Satan will always function in this manner. He is always throwing accusations about. Sometimes he plagues our minds with self-defeating accusations that are designed to cause us to belittle the work of grace in our lives. In Job's case, the devil brought an unfounded accusation against him. Job was upright, he was being blessed by God in his substance. In truth, one could say his territory was enlarged and he enjoyed the favor of the Lord. If anyone should be exempted from suffering, Job's name would head the list. Or so we would think. And the reality is that we often believe that those of us who are upright must be exempted from the challenges of the lower life. Not so, especially not from a biblical basis. The Bible actually supposes that the righteous will be persecuted, and so pronounces a blessing for such one. Matthew 5, verse 10. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It is almost an inevitability that we will encounter some form of pain in our lives. Some of us will have to endure sickness. Christians have been diagnosed with every illness common to man and have had to undergo surgery, chemo, radiation therapy, medicinal regimes, and many other forms of treatments as a result. We all suffer loss, whether a loss of job, property, or loved ones. We all suffer or will suffer loss. There is also the surety of emotional wounds that can stem from breakups, unmet expectations, lack of reciprocity in relationships at work, at home, or church. Pain and suffering are normative elements of life for the living. Job's reply to Zophar the Naamathite makes this clear. Job 14, verse 1. Mortals born of woman are of few days and full of trouble. In all his afflictions, Job had only two desires. The first may seem strange, but I think it shows Job's faith and recognition that ultimately God had a hand in his suffering, since God is sovereign. Job understood that his life was in God's care, so he stated in Job 13, verse 20-21, "Only grant me these two things, God, and then I will not hide from you. Withdraw your hand far from me, and stop frightening me with your terrors." His days of trouble were ultimate in the hands of God, even though they were frightening. His second request was for a conversation with his God. Verse 22 say, "Then summon me and I will answer, or let me speak and you reply to me." He was not sure how the conversation would begin, whether God would initiate it or God would respond to him after he spoke. What he was certain of is that in his pain and suffering, the voice of God was necessary. He wanted to know the mind of God as would be revealed through his voice. When we are at our wits' end, it is the voice of God that has the potency to bring comfort or resolution. I want to encourage you to tune your ears to the voice of God when you are experiencing your measure of pain. Job had so many circles speaking. We see the reporters of the bad news. No fault of theirs, they had to herald the news of Job's loss. We see in Job's scenario his wife's utterance. In Job 2 verse 9, then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die." This is an audacious statement. Curse God and die. Imagine this as a dagger to Job's heart, an individual as close as your wife being apathetic, and even injurious your spirit with such an exclamation. Then his 3 friends came and wounded him even more with their words. There was also the voice of the youngster, Elihu. He's indignant and articulate. He defends God, and who would want to close their ears to one who is standing in God's defense? But I would suggest that in our pain, the voice of the preacher is less significant to the voice of God. Job didn't want to hear another sermon. He wanted to hear the voice of God. We must desire, above all else, a conversation with God and God alone. Seek His voice with everything that you possess. Even if it is with the last of your strength, yearn for His voice. He is a God who doesn't go in hiding when the going gets tough. He desires to speak. We must make His voice priority. Nothing can bring the comfort that we need like the voice of God. Nothing is as majestic, as awe-striking, as bondage-breaking as the voice of God. David penned Psalm 29 to testify of this very fact and exalts the voice of God in verses 3 to 9. The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The voice of the Lord flashes forth flames of fire. The voice of the Lord shakes the wilderness. The voice of the Lord makes the deer give birth and strips the forest bare, and in His temple all cry, "Glory." Such is the splendor of the voice of God that we should never fail to seek a conversation with Him when we are in pain. I also want to assure you that the voice of God comes to bring calm and to steady our soul in a holy hush. He doesn't always shout in majesty, thunder, and earthquakes. Sometimes, after the earthquake, came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire, and after the fire came a gentle whisper. 1 Kings 19 verse 12. His voice will come in and with stillness sometimes. We just need to ensure that we are listening keenly. Like Job in the chapter 38 verse 1, God will speak to us through our storm, through our pain. The product. The beauty of Job's situation, which is also true of ours, whether in this life or the life that Christ has procured for us in His new kingdom, is that it will get better. We will be blessed after our pain, and our later state will be even more blessed than our former. It is the voice of God that will prepare us for this newness that will come to our lives. The pain is not eternal, but our blessings are. God has appointed such wonders for us that our minds cannot begin to fathom. We must remain anchored. Remain in the mode of listening. God is speaking.